Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Oracles of Theleston, Episode 4, Deserts of the Ghoravi. So, we're going to be talking all about the last fireside chat, which talked a whole lot about the Ghoravi and Amakatha and Kongarai and how you get there, and really a lot of interesting stuff. It was packed with information. I had to go back through and write notes on it to make sure I covered everything. Even then, I feel like there was a lot of stuff that I probably could have gone back through and did another pass on the notes with. Very informative, very uh, detail and filled episode. So, that being said, let's just kind of go around here and let you guys say a little bit before we get right into it. Dig Zero, do you have any thoughts, anything you wanted to share before we get started?
Yeah, because that area is one of my main interests in Revival. Once we got them to reveal the secret information that they were never going to reveal until the game was live. Um, but if people don't know, for Revival, I had about 20 something all prepared. And then as we got more information about Kongarai and the surrounding area, I completely switched what was planning to be my well, almost completely switched what was planning to be my main character. And if it would be possible to destroy Kongarai, I would play a Ghoravi, and that would be my primary goal: is to destroy the city and return it back to the native people, which wasn't really possible for Revival, but could be possible for the pen and paper game. So that would be a primary goal of mine. But it's interesting to me because the way Snipe Hunter and Omwa talk about this area, it's a very Western point of view to me. And I have a very non-Western viewpoint. And I think there is a certain bias on the part of Snipe Hunter and Omwa. So some of the things I say might seem anti, but it's not personal against them. It's just, you know, we're in a world that has magic, so we're not locked into the Western scientific viewpoint of the Synod. I mean, the Synod isn't even necessarily all that locked into science, but, we're not locked into the Western view of life in a world without magic. So other possibilities should be there to allow the Ghoravi to reclaim some of their former. Should be a great discussion, I think.
I think it should be. It's interesting because when we were just touching on that before we started the show, and I don't know that it's an intentional. I don't know that it's intentionally overlooked, that it's, oh, well, we just have this one viewpoint and we're ignoring the magical aspects or spiritual aspects of it. I wonder if it isn't actually intentional to protect from players that other aspect of it, for them to discover and seek out the, alternate methods of I don't know, discovery on these things. I generally agree, though. I mean, it's always interesting. Like I said, I've had similar feelings of kind of Western viewpoints of Eastern culture. So it's kind of so I can understand it, but at the same time, with the way things are always half hints and how both open yet cryptic everything has been given to us, it does tend to be I tend to think that it's not so much that they're not being viewed that way, so much as a beginning player, that's the viewpoint you take as your kind of neophyte into this world. How your character develops will ultimately change or potentially change how you approach those challenges or how you approach that discovery. So it may not, or it may start off that way, but it doesn't mean that it could not become much more unbound in its thinking.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I've kind of got a little bit of experience. I had actually taken a anthropology of witchcraft and religion class back in my community college days. It's actually one of my favorite classes, and probably one that I got the most practical stuff out of all of the history, anthropology related classes that I took throughout my education. And there are definitely some things in there that really resonated with me, and the idea that, Western science being what it is, maybe can't quite explain or understand things, or it takes a while for it to really like, be broken down and analyzed the way that it can be understood. I think it was the Tobrian Island people that have their own form of magic is basically singing as they do everything. It helps keep them calm, keep them focused. Large animals will hear something in the distance and not come near. They can hear each other, so if they get lost or broken off from the group, they can catch up real easily. So they do that with everything they do. When they're cooking, when they're hunting, when they're, I would imagine maybe not necessarily using the bathroom, but hopefully not.
Hey,
Maybe,
it might be a form of prayer. Who knows?
But
I'm sure they've
you
got
know,
some prayer for that sometimes.
I
so
can recall 1 or 2 points in my life praying at a toilet. Yes.
Hmm.
so basically that it was actually a functional magic that actually worked for them. Now the one thing they didn't sing for was there's basically this like knockout herb blend that they would put in this sack and then throw in the water, and there's these types of fish that just like knock them right the hell out, and they just kind of, you pick them out of the water. And they said no, we don't really sing. That's the one thing they don't sing for, because it's I would imagine for their lore, it's like a very somber act. You're not really in any danger. You're being the predator here. But realistically, it's probably, if you're making a bunch of loud noise, you're gonna scare the damn fish away before they get knocked out by the stuff. So, you know, just throw the bag in and be quiet and get your damn fish. You got a family to feed. You got a town to feed. So that's the sort of thing that I think of with the expression of magic and like non-Western ideas and cultures and stuff. I actually just picked up a book yesterday, just slightly off topic, Handbook of American Indian Games, and they're all like cited for what culture they come from, why they play it, and that sort of stuff, how it works. So it's a nice little book. It's definitely, again, something to help me like observe things from a non-Western perspective and like what they did for fun and competition and that sort of stuff. So yeah, definitely like taking the Western mentality, though it's hard to take the Western mentality out of what's happening on Akatha, because to be perfectly honest, it's like an island that Rome came through and was able to not necessarily conquer and make their own stronghold in, but establish a foothold that allows them to maintain a presence. And by the opposite of the will of the people, by their absolute dismay, Congarai was turned into a city. It was not a city before.
Right, and we'll get there. But
Yeah.
where Snipe and Ombor are saying things like, they can't read the writing because that's been lost to history, where you can go talk to ancient spirits or
Right.
spirits in the past. That's not necessarily lost to history. It would be lost to history from a Western point of view, but it's not necessarily lost to history when you actually
Right,
can
from
contact
a
ancient
Western
spirits.
scientific, non-magical point of view. But I think that's part of it.
Lost to
Is
history, though. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
if we're going to talk about it from like the mundane, non-adventurous individual's perspective, like, yeah, to our conventional historians, it's lost to us. That doesn't mean that the knowledge isn't somewhere out there. We just don't know where it is and have no access to it, and nobody has successfully brought back any information on this subject in a while. So it might not necessarily be that they even think that it's actually lost, so much as kind of admitting defeat, that they're unsure of how to actually proceed to get that information. So kind of in a brick wall until us ambitious, adventurous players come along and kind of break through and start finding that information deep down in a desert or wherever.
It doesn't even necessarily mean lost permanent. I mean, we can't take it just on the purely surface value of it's just currently lost to us. It doesn't mean we can't find it. Doesn't mean we don't know ways to proceed. Just we don't have it right this second. That much said, I'm got a bit of lost history to pick out of my oven here real quick, so I will be right back. Sorry for that.
He's got a bun in the oven. Okay, might
So many puns.
might be laborious. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and bread. That's while he's away for.
Speaking of buns in the oven,
go ahead.
Zog just delivered a new bun, Ingrid. Thursday, I believe. So, Zog from our Theory Forge Fridays podcast.
Yep. I
was hoping we could restart that, but now there's a baby, so I guess he probably won't have a lot of time. But.
Yeah, to be fair, I think Friday was ending up to be too busy. I think we were looking to move to Saturday anyway.
Yeah. But we should figure that out, especially now that Phantom X has his new rig.
Yeah, and internets and stuff.
Yeah.
What did I miss?
Oh.
I was just talking about, since you were getting a bun out of the oven, that Zog just had a baby Thursday.
Congratulations.
Yep.
Enjoy that like sleep.
So where did you want to kick off the discussion? What aspect? Did you want to follow an order of the fireside chat? Or?
I think I do want to start with that one because, or the first part of that, because it was definitely an interesting discussion. Like, how do you even get to Anacotha? How do you even get to Congarai? And there's not that there aren't potentially infinite ways to get there, but the two conventional ways, the two ways you could regularly pay somebody to reasonably get you there safely. Is going from Valor or going from Crown's Rock. And it sounds like one or both of those has a quite a treacherous path to go just on the just sailing there, that if you don't have good charts and you don't have a good pilot, there's a good chance you're going to end up being shipwrecked, and the shipwrecks aren't going to sit around for a while. It's deep water in a lot of these places. That ship's just going under. It's just lost. Good luck. So
sounds like you're going to want a guide with you, whether you're on water or in the desert or wherever you are.
So that's,
if you're headed there, you're going to want a guide always.
Or at the very least, pick a captain who's made several successful trips. Maybe a fairly wealthy one.
Yeah.
We've been hinted at that the shoals there and the sound itself is actually fairly deep. It's not shallow water as we typically kind of expect in a bay area. So a lot of ships lost, pretty treacherous. But if the guy's made several trips, he's making some money, then he knows what he's doing, right? Go with that guy.
I would say,
and this is the thing. Hold on, I just find it interesting that money pops up a lot. I don't know that everybody's gonna necessarily be interested in wealth in that way. You have to be experienced, but there might be other motivations besides money that's having you go back and forth.
Well, maybe not necessarily as a trader. I'm thinking of for a captain why they would be going back and forth. Like from Valor, it's mostly going to be trade or people that are going on vacations or whatever. That it sounds like theirs is a much more regularly used route. There's a lot more shipping, a lot more export. Versus Crown's Rock, there isn't much export, and I don't think there's much import going on either. So if you're going from Crown's Rock, you're going for business, or there's some luxury or some archaeological, whatever it is. But there's they were saying that there's just generally much less volume coming from Crown's Rock. Versus Valor is just a much higher volume. So it sounds like if you want to go, let's say you're starting a campaign, you're a player, and your GM lets you pick, and you want to go to Anacotha, but you don't get to start there, you might pick Valor. It's gonna be probably the most regular route. You might even be able to get away with stowing away, or pretending you're someone who's actually part of the crew or something, maybe having a little skill from having worked on the dogs before, whatever. It seems like Crown's
probably
Rock,
certainly trade your trip a bit.
Yeah, it seems like Crown's Rock, you can get there for sure, but Seems like a much more difficult, and potentially you'll find, I would imagine, less pilots who can actually get the ship from point A to point B safely.
Well, and it's interesting. I think that if you were starting out from Crown's Rock, the logical step would be Crown's Rock to Valor, anyways, and then Valor to Ghoravi. Touching back on the money thing, though, it's not actually money that interests me on this one. It's more of a philosophy of safety. A wealthy, or not, maybe not even wealthy, a successful trader making his runs has a vested interest in arriving and departing safely. And that's really the basis of it right there. It's not that the money
or
is
archaeologist or warrior
sure,
or all kinds of other stuff, but it needs to be successful for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. I mean, yes, you could save some coin. You could maybe ply your trade going with a guy who's got a skiff, saying, "Nah, I've made this trip, that dozen times. It'll be fine." Or you could go on the ship that is weathered and seasoned with a seasoned crew who has a vested interest in arriving safely every time. I'm going to make the trip. I'd rather at least get there before I'm going to get have an unfortunate happenstance befall me. But yeah, definitely Valor, and I would almost see that the natural flow of trade would generally be that pattern anyway. I actually don't. I mean, I could see scenarios where you would try to go straight from Crown's Rock to Ghoravi, but generally speaking, ships follow the coast. They try to stop at regular ports. It would make sense for them to stop there anyway, so you probably have that as an option to approach.
And I can even see for Valor in particular actually having a fleet of ships, and that's partially part of their training program, and it's partially how they get a lot of things from point A to point B, is that you've got your most experienced crew in the lead ship and everybody else kind of following behind 50 meters back or whatever. And if everybody is able to I would imagine lead ship's the most experienced, and then least experience is behind them, scaling up to next most experienced in the back. So that way the people that are learning the routes for the first time have the least likely chance of straying and varying, versus the ones who are almost at that senior level where they can do it themselves. They would be the ones in the back who can help potentially redirect stragglers, or if they get particularly disconnected because of a storm or something, they can still potentially make it, or at least know that it's time to turn back, sort of thing. So I think that
brings
go ahead.
That brings up for me a question about the concept of ghost ships. I'm wondering what happens if you happen to know a way to typically think of spirit walking, but perhaps you can send your ship across the oceans in a different plane, and then we think of ghost ships as being ships in the mundane world that might have ghosts on them, but what's the point of view of ships popping out of the ether basically to arrive? That's their regular route.
And imagine that would be. I mean, could it happen? I could believe it could happen, but looking at the amount of effort so far described for planeswalkers and for people who can access that level of magic is pretty incredible for the average person as it is. So to move that massive a vessel, that many people, or maybe not even a large vessel, could be just, again, a small schooner, but it's got to be something seaworthy.
That would be
cool.
legend.
It would be freaking cool to see, but holy crap, my mind boggles a bit at the amount of
I just imagine it'd be something brutal. You sacrifice something big like a whale. You make a rift that lets you take the entire ship through Anamaya's realm, and once you're there, like, her and the Fetchers are like, oh, hell no, we're not going to have a ship in here. They just kick you out in full, but, they have a hard time moving such a giant thing, so by the time they get you out, you're definitely in a completely different place. Hopefully it's on the water, but, that could also be like the, instead of a Trojan horse, the teleporting ship of doom or whatever. You can appear and invade potentially somewhere on land with this ship that just got kicked out of the realm of where you're dead and hanging out.
It opens up a whole new thing, planar cartography. But because it's planes, right? Can you reliably translate a position? So it's almost like imagining our starting point is here. We want to get here, but the space is folded, right? So how do you actually chart that out, or is it just you open it, you have a kind of ritual that gives you a rough destination in mind, and you just hope it lands? You know, normally it's okay, but that last time your ship ended 40 feet above the water and plummeted into it, did a lot of damage, but hey, you still got there.
You rolled a 1.
Oh.
So you finally made it to. It sounds like you've got a free port on the east side and a free port on the west side, and both of them are near some mountains. So either way, it sounds like a kind of a tough trek to get through. Kongarai is your goal. Otherwise, if you're just trying to go from the port to some nearby features, potentially not so bad. Though it sounds like the majority of the desert out there is alkali desert. Think of like Death Valley. Think of like the playa that you see with the Burning Man. Like they're talking about Burning Man foot that you can get like burns and lesions and all sorts of nasty stuff if you're in that environment for too long without proper protection. So
Not a hospitable place, certainly.
no. So one of the things they emphasize is you always have a guide. You follow the guide. They'll help you get to the oases. The oases, some might be more established. They have a little bit of a settlement there, though. Few people would actually be living there. Probably just like guards who have been deployed there by one of the organizations of Kongarai or otherwise. It's just to make sure that the place is maintained and the people can always get water there, and that the riders or raiders or whatever Verde wants to call them haven't come through and kicked it over or turned it into their own place. So making your way around definitely seems like a challenging sort of thing going on. You need guidance. You need guidance and or a good map and or seems like even a little bit of luck is just important just to be able to get from point A to point B. It's not a very fun place.
Guidance is overrated. Just roll your dice, hope for the best. Head out in that direction. That's the spirit of adventure.
Yeah,
Or
just
how
look for the
make new
tallest thing
characters
on the
very
horizon
quickly.
and go towards it. That's definitely where civilization's at.
If you start finding a trail of desiccated corpses, you're probably headed the wrong way. But what'll be interesting is when you do get there. Actually, this kind of crossed my mind a few times. Is in the revival, the Meow, Kongarai was so-called red state, and I'm curious how that'll translate too when you with a PnP, where what I guess the tendencies of people there are going to be, since you won't have a player base just starting from there. And I know the whole making Kongarai red as a whole was had some controversy amongst people, but just kind of speculating loud, like let's say you get there successfully, what is the new player's welcome app to be like? Pebble in the pond, it makes a ripple, someone notices, or just completely you've stepped into Mos Eisley, no one pays attention to you, and you just go about whatever your biz is.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot to think about with that, because it now by a red state you're talking about like PvP enabled everywhere sort of thing.
Yeah, we had a lot of people who were looking forward to starting there because they were apt, PvPers. I considered it for the same reason.
Well, I guess here's the question: if you're in Crown's Rock, can you attack anybody anywhere, and you'll just have to suffer the consequences, or is there like some sort of magical? You can't arm yourself unless you've been insulted or something sort of thing. Because I'd imagine everywhere's kind of a red location. If you think about it, it just happens to be
Right.
that this one, the rules are a little bit different. It's just like if you kill somebody and during the fight you incur some damage, you have to pay for the damage, but the person's still dead. And that's just
So,
what's left.
Snipe and Obo have been kind of providing feedback, and yeah, it was only red insofar that there was a PvP-enabled town as opposed to a blue or safe city. And that is kind of on the simple side. That's all it really boils down to. But I was just kind of curious because when we think of it in the sense of a Meow, right, you had players starting everywhere, and so the players there naturally had that PvP enabled experience. But since you as a P&P game aren't going to just naturally find actual player characters in that city, what, if anything, comes from it as the kind of impression of the city, which it sounds like they're saying, may not be actually a big deal since they don't need to have a mechanical setting for law abiding. So it may end up being kind of nothing at all. It's just was kind of curious because that was a very big issue at the time when people would discuss Ghoravi as a red city versus now as that's been translated into a PnP where it was there. I guess I was wondering, was there going to be an expectation that maybe the NPCs there were just naturally more hostile or something to that effect because that was the only way to get red across.
I mean, what it ultimately means to me is like, if you aren't somebody who is somebody, like, your life is kind of cheap out there. It's, I feel like that's
Right.
kind of the same way in Crown's Rock, though. Like, it's just you're more likely to be sacrificed to Hydra or something like that in Crown's Rock versus just like, slit throat and mugged or whatever in the Congarai. But that's just the way that it's kind of been presented. And I feel like, I saw you did the eye roll, Diggs. You're right. That might be more like, if you're from Valor or Crown's Rock, that might be more your opinion of the area. That, oh yeah, life is cheap, and they'll just leave you dead for your valuables or whatever. And I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. I'm sure people have their their codes of conduct and everything. And it's like, yeah, if you're like, total worthless scum, you're gonna do the same thing in Crown Rock you're gonna do in Conquerai. It doesn't matter. You're just you're just a villain. But if it's a dispute over something, and that's why it turned into someone ended up dying. It's, I guess, a little bit of a different thing. Again, that still just makes me think of Romeo and Juliet. Like, they were brawling over absolutely nothing, really. But the thing that comes to mind for me is Ultima Online. Like, the way it worked with that, anybody could really attack anyone anywhere at any time. Just if you were within the perimeter of a defended area, the person who gets attacked screams out guards, and a guard will insta-jib the person who got attacked, or the person who did the attacking, rather, with a halberd in the back of the head, just one shot it, and they're just, the body's laying there, so you can just loot them. And I feel like that would also be kind of frowned upon, as like if somebody does get killed in the streets in Congarai, it seems like it'd be incredibly tasteless if you just like start reaching in their pockets in front of everybody all of a sudden. Like, that's so if there's a fight going on, it seems like it would have to be over something important. Otherwise, there's a lot of, it seems like a lot of risk involved, especially you piss the wrong person off, you kill the wrong like random tourist, well, they come back with a lot more forces, and you start being in trouble for it. So
whether or not it's frowned upon to loot somebody you've just killed or who has just died should be up to, that should be a cultural value system. Some cultures don't even recognize the concept of of theft in any case. And ownership can have very different meanings to very different things. Robbing the dead can have very different meanings to different people. But I'm thinking in terms of the factions of the gods, which was set up. Omwa had said at one point, but he knows which gods are red and which gods are blue, and I would hope that that's still the case for the PnP. That's what I'd be interested in seeing still continue in terms of red, blue, and gray. But also, when I think of different factions, like, I'm wondering, what does it take to maintain an oasis? Is that something that you need godly help with? Do you use magic in order to, or prayer in order to help ensure that an oasis remains an oasis, or could you use magic and prayer to develop a new oasis? And if you are praying to gods and they are helping you, what is it that they will be asking of you to do that is perfectly good in your point of view, from your perspective, from your culture, but not necessarily be good in the context of another culture? So again, as I'm thinking about wanting to destroy Ghoravi and return life closer to the way it was before that city existed, are there gods that would be pushing for that? That would be helping me destroy civilization as the Synod recognizes it, and that would help me develop an oasis, perhaps spread the verdant aspects of an oasis to reclaim the grasslands that it used to be. And again, how does that impact, how does that conflict with the people who are now living there? Those are the things that I want to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think about a lot of unlikely partners supporting you on that. Gods who would normally be supporting like war and destruction and stuff like that.
I don't know why that's viewed as war
well,
and destruction. I don't view that as war and destruction. But go
well,
ahead.
no. It's that the ones who value that sort of thing might be more interested in the idea of a culture being destroyed. Likewise, ones that want to preserve nature and restore it to its natural state, who might not necessarily want anything to do with war, but just see that, well, that's how things are going on. You get different blessings from different places that are kind of unexpected together. You get a lot of help that you didn't think that you were going to get. Likewise, I would imagine if you're trying to destroy a newly established culture and civilization, that there's a lot of the aesthetics and a lot of that sort of thing that a god who would prefer art might actually oppose you. They might say, I see what you're trying to do, and that's great, but there's this good thing that's been established now, and I'm going to try to stop you. So,
well, that's the wonderful thing about perspective in general. You as the player may be trying this, and yes, this might be a great thing. And I believe, if I recall, there were Ghoravi who had that same mindset. They wanted to restore, that area to, their kind of rightful traditions, which makes them, which makes it a great stance for them to take to other people. That's nothing less than ethnic cleansing. That's not a good thing, but it just depends on which side of the fence you fall on. Or honestly, with how varied both godly and mortal intentions work. I mean, it's not even a fence. It's a 20-sided dice. You could fall anywhere on that spectrum, and certainly gods could come in and out of favor of that. They may, especially since they are so tangible, or at least since their work is tangible, whether we see it or not. They have that direct intervention or subtle, maybe side, intervention, but the point is they can affect things, and their machinations will probably manifest in multiple ways on that, and they may have competing interests in that. So that would actually end up being a really interesting story from the DM's point of view, having to have that pool of gods and having to really figure out who's going to be in support of what and what kind of obstacles you as a player would be running into to accomplish that. I don't know. It'd be a lot of fun. It's be a hell of a mess. So,
hell yes, it would be. And you had mentioned something. If everybody has to be killed, well, maybe not. If you can actually convince the people of Ghoravi to make sledgehammers, break down all of the walls, and leave with their possessions, you don't have to kill everybody. I mean, you can just.
It's just different sides. But we have very good case examples of cultures in this world that have said, we're going to go back to our old ways, and the best way to do that is get rid of everyone who wasn't part of us.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see how that plays out when it plays out, if it plays out.
But yeah, again, that's the beauty of it, is you will have a very dynamic campaign and filled with the ethical conundrums that I enjoy so much in those kind of situations.
The other thing is there's a profit directive to maintain Ghoravi, and I think that's a lot of where outside forces will get involved if the native cultures try to retake it. That all the business, all the trade, all of that stuff that's been established, you're going to get forces from outside of Kongarai and outside of Anakatha sending their aid to try to restore and try to reclaim it. So it seems like it'd be a very long and hard fought battle, if it comes down to being a battle.
Yeah, it depends, and it depends on what kind of powers you're falling on to raise the city. But yeah, that's one of the things that I loved about the reveal of Kongarai and the lore behind it is that I'm normally a pacifist, but once I heard the story of the Ghoravi, I was like, fuck Kongarai. If I've got to destroy the city and you want to stay in the city and you're going to die because you want to stay there and defend it, you're just going to have to die.
I would like to play a campaign with you just to see you have this aspect manifest.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not against, I'd prefer not to have to kill you, but if you're going to stay and fight, then, I'm going to do what it takes to destroy the city. If I have to call down a meteor to do it, okay, I'll call down a meteor to do it. And we can reestablish trade afterwards. But that's, again, what I loved is as a pacifist to have the lore presented in such a way that I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not a pacifist in this particular instance. And that's what I'm really waiting for with MMOs, since we're, that's the dream, is that we can revolutionize these multiplayer online games, is where the conflicts are so visceral that it's not just, I like killing other players or I like battling other players, but I have these values, these are the values that I'm going to support, and this is the stuff that it's going to help me with my goals and my outlook on life. And then if you're opposed to it, well, then we've got conflict, and if we have to fight,
such binary,
I prefer not to fight, but if we have to fight, maybe I feel so strongly about that we just have to fight.
Yeah, I mean, I after hearing the whole episode and kind of learning about everything, it really does seem like the whole thing is, the establishment of the Synod's imperialism in the area. To be perfectly honest, and it's not just the building and maintenance of Kongarai, but it's everything. It's how they've named their maps after the things they want to name them after. I think of the old British maps that used to call China Cathay or whatever, and it's like nobody calls it that except for Cathay Bank. They're like the only other place where I hear that these days, or in art history, and that it's that sort of thing. Is like how do you say that you've really taken an area over? Oh well, we've named everything after things we wanted to name them after.
Right.
Chief Seattle didn't want to. He said, "Don't name anything after me." Here we are with the city of Seattle. So, that's imperialism right there. That's kind of what that's occurred. So, I'm definitely in that battle, Diggs. I'm on your side with it. I'm definitely looking to bring down Kongarai as well. Unless
and
that's not how my
as Omba talks about, good guy versus good guy, who's good guy from whose perspective, and that's one of the other things that I loved about Revival 2 and was hoping to see with that, and hope we can see continue with Theleston is, we normally think about these fixed alignments, but what happens when you have sanity checks, when you're going mad, and you could be thinking that you're good, but actually, I see in my head that I'm killing a monster, but in reality, it's somebody's grandma.
That's even worse.
What happens when you've got madness in there? You think that you're good, but might not actually be good.
Of course, that's again always perspective, anyways, which again is a great thing about it. No one's, as what they say, no one's the the villain of their own story.
Yeah.
Everyone who's motivated to do anything is generally motivated to do it because they believe it's the right thing to do. And we see this certainly with people who today suffer some form of mental issue, schizophrenia, for example, or other things where their viewpoint is correct as far as they can tell, and they cannot fathom why people don't agree with them.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. That's certainly a challenge that I think anyone would experience trying to set it up, because we go in and say, well, it makes sense. There's a native tradition, there's native culture here. It needs to be preserved. It needs to be put back in place. But for all the people who have made it their home over the last, 100 years, that's not going to jive with them, and they're no less wrong for wanting that.
That's right. Right.
Unless I'm playing, in which case my opinion is the correct one. They're just wrong.
Where was I? You just sidled something in my head of moving on. Maybe it was to because we had talked about the alkali deserts, and then we did not talk about like the attire that you would wear in order to protect yourself from that environment. I think they were talking about linens and possibly silks, but having layers of linens because you could get burns from the alkali, things like that. Make sure that your head is wrapped, I guess, to protect from the dust.
Yeah, the dust itself seems like it gets really choking. Anything, even like the gentlest breeze, is going to kick up a lot of dust. There's not really a lot of humidity whatsoever. It's just dry. There's not much really helping you there. So yeah, if you don't have water with you, if you aren't covered in, as they were saying on the show, silk is preferred, but linen, if you got it, you just got to be covered. You just got to be able to protect yourself from that playa. It's going to get through, but it's going to get through a lot less if you're covered in layers of linen. I would imagine it's also kind of got the effect that it's insulating you from heat in some ways. It's keeping your moisture and the sweat in, so any air that gets through is able to breathe and able to kind of cool you down a little bit, versus if you were wearing like thick leather or something, that doesn't have any room to breathe. It's you might as well be wearing a diving suit or something. You're just going to be sweating like a pig, and there's not going to be any help for you.
I'm trying to understand how horses are going to survive in an alkali desert. So there are camels, and I'm not sure why there were camels there, since it was originally a grasslands area. But if it's a desert, it seems like camels would survive better than horses. What are the horses eating? I know there's an oasis and whatnot, I guess, for them to get water, but really there's enough grass for it to be a rider culture? I'm having a hard time trying to...
Yeah, I'm actually
wrap my head around
looking that up right now about...
Yeah, it's I don't know, maybe that's a major part of their trade reasons. Quantities of...
importing grass for horses?
Well, importing hay, but I would the pH of the deserts would definitely not contribute towards even healthy scrubland growth, which a horse could graze on. So I definitely think that's a good point. That'd be a challenge. But we know, again, we try not to get caught too much into our world versus this world, but at the same time, there are bases in that, and there are desert cultures, or I shouldn't say desert, but cultures that are closely entwined with that have had horses, like Rose actually just Baby Can just linked in there, Arabian horses. But ultimately they were still able to go back to areas that had some grazing capability and some ability to foster a food source for them.
Okay.
But at the same time, the culture survived out there as a whole. So clearly, they're not incapable of growing, foodstuffs. So couldn't be importing everything.
Yeah, there's this apparently the Namib desert horse. They apparently were. It sounds like they're horses that were released somewhere towards the middle or the end of World War I or something like that, and they've just been doing their thing. There's like a small population of them, but even though they're in the desert, except in extreme drought, they're just fine. So, I think part of it might be that horses are just adaptable, and horses that actually originate in those areas that they've genetically been developed and reinforced from
And
the best
we see that
competitors or
again.
whatever.
They tend to be a bit smaller and a little bit. They're more adapted to the environment. We're probably never going to find a Clydesdale in the desert, but they're really horses that can survive. And as it's been brought up in channel, Anacotha is technically there. It is a fertile grassland, but I don't know what the challenge is really. I mean, that would be a whole industry of itself to raise horses right at that edge of safety and fertile and breadbasket-y area, and then try to bring them over and bring them back. So I mean,
Well, they talk about the grasslands being haunted, and that if you go there,
and that too,
you're
yeah.
not coming back. But haunted.
But I think that's the original areas. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, where the actual cities were, right?
I think of haunted though, like, is it really haunted, or they're just like very, very, very militant raiders that like remove all
Riders.
evidence?
Yeah, I don't
Riders-
know. That's why I need the guidebooks.
Riding raiders,
That's why I
honestly.
need to know.
So that's I mean that's the sort of thing, like, about this stuff. Like, the first thing I would do as a player in the Meow is like, yeah, I'm off into the grasslands. See you later, guys.
No, that's
We'll
exactly.
see what
I've said
happens.
multiple times. Anacotha interests me to such a huge degree over other areas in Theleston, because it's. I have to know why. There's like a compulsive need to understand how the civilization there could collapse like that, because it's got a huge resource of water, has it has fertile land. There should be no reason, from a resource standpoint, to fail. So what culturally failed, what outside force caused it, I don't know. Could be nothing. Could be very mundane when I get there. But the compulsion to find that out was so strong that I was already planning ways to, get out there, even if it was a hodgepodge of dying and trying to find the right, exit gate that would get me that bit closer, and do a good old, course run and outrun some fetchers too. I mean, whatever it was, I wanted to find out. And so Congarad being so close to it is interesting, because really there has to be a compelling reason why they just haven't moved there either. It can't just be all culture.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
can't tell me that my culture. I mean, there are going to be some people who feel that their culture and their traditions are so important they need to stay there. But newcomers to the area would certainly be like, hey, look, there's like right on the other side of this mountain, through this relatively easy mountain pass, is fertile land and water. Why the hell aren't we there? There's got to be a reason for it.
I also think about, there has to be some amount of some reason why the arable land diminished so much. Like, was it actually the establishment of Congarine that all of the water that would be coming through that somehow got blocked, or was this something that just happened over time, and there was not that anybody specifically did anything that caused it? Or maybe there was. Maybe it was something more supernatural. Someone pissed off a god, or they stopped sacrificing whatever to a specific god, and so the water stopped flowing. Whatever it is.
Yeah, it could be something mundane. We know there's huge land, lake of body of water. Maybe that had an underground aquifer that also fed parts of the Congarine on the other side that, earthquake or what have you is blocked off. Or I tend to suspect larger godly involvement in that. Probably not for any good reason other than that, hey, it's a world where gods exist. How the hell would they not be involved in this? It's not the best reasoning.
Well, the ancestors of the Ghoravi weren't so nice with the Colossians, and there was a kind of war, and there's some supernatural godly punishment leaning in there, if I recall the lore correctly. And a lot of this was happening around that time where the whole world was, before the Synod got together, there was a cataclysm. So it's what did the Ghoravi do to help cause that cataclysm is part of the ancient lore, if I recall correctly. But what do we do now that you're there? And again, in my mind, the group that I'm going to be trying to head is just aren't fond of cities, and They want to return to their nomadic way of life, and I think there should be a reason why they had a nomadic, a supernatural reason why they led a nomadic lifestyle and went from place to place, and I think places of worship on some kind of schedule that I think might be good to reestablish. But again, good from whose point of view? But I think
Right. Yeah.
I can see all sorts of things really happening in the in Anacotha, like surrounding Congarai and a lot of those areas. I actually, just as much as players trying to destroy Congarai, I could imagine there's players trying to further reinforce it and make their own establishments, their own like pathway trail leading between all of the major oases that they've reinforced, and having their own patrol routes that go back and forth to make sure things are clear, that sort of stuff. I could really see players saying, well, it's kind of a crappy way to get from point A to point B. I see business opportunities in that. Or maybe it's not that.
well,
Maybe it's in fact their missionary work, that this is their duty to whatever their main patron god is that, establish these routes, help people get from point A to point B,
Right.
whatever ends it's for, that's their means to it. And there's it could be just trying to promote that religion or that god or whatever. It could be something completely different. It could be, for all they know, that they're actually establishing the area that's later going to be attacked in some punishment that God is going to lay down on that area that they've been planning for decades or whatever.
yeah, I think they mentioned in the fireside chat that people have tried to make a major road from the Freeport to Congarai, but it always fails for whatever reason. So um, I would expect people would be trying.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's just the writers going and knocking it down because they want to have dominance over the area. Who knows? Could be something supernatural. That could just be that they're approaching it the wrong way. Instead of building a bunch of small buildings, you build one giant like structure you can see in the distance everywhere that you want people to go, and hope that they don't get knocked over, I guess. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to approach that. So some other things that were kind of interesting. There was a talk of foodstuffs that grains, not really much of it. Dates you're going to see, honey you're going to see, fermented milks you're going to see. Different sorts of fermented milks exist. You can get your slight alcohol fizzy one. You can get the stuff that you're trying to get particularly drunk off of. I would imagine some amount of cheese might actually work in some of these environments, though with the heat I'm not sure how well most of the cheeses would do. You'd probably have to be in a cooler area. Maybe it's just like certain caves where you can make cheese or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they could have dug out the equivalent of a wine, so a cellar. I mean, once you're far enough underground, it's going to stay pretty cool. Again, something that's been relatively well mastered in various cultures at various temperatures here. I imagine, though, I bet they're probably all very young cheeses, no matter what it is. They probably, when they consume them, they're probably not aged terribly long.
Yeah.
Likewise, with their drinks.
I would imagine a lot of not only fresh meats but jerked meat. They talked about fish, horse, reptiles, birds. I would imagine if there's camels are probably also in the mix. If you've got birds,
tasty non-believers,
eggs are in the mix. Tasty non-believers, I guess. That could be anywhere in this world of Theleston, though. Like,
I'm sure there's somewhere that in some terrible way.
And then I would imagine it sounds like, I'm not really sure like how well stuff grows, though. I imagine there's going to be some amount of succulents and some amount of like little plants and stuff here and there. There's probably insects that actually like collect hydration from one source or another, and they're in a pinch, they're what you got to do if you got to stay hydrated. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of interesting flavors, a lot of herbs and stuff that's gonna kind of give it a lot of interesting flavor. But I would imagine a lot of the spices probably get imported from other places, and a lot of the stuff that's gonna grow, and it's the spices that they use, but they grow better in other places, so you just have it grown there and shipped over, that sort of thing.
Mhm. And then the housing, we kind of alluded to it. Um, Homes being built into caves, but I think what did they mention? Capitone,
Um,
Well, no,
as
I
one of
think I
their.
think they were saying that one was a little too organic. That would be kind of over the top for a lot of the
They
herbs.
said
So
that of the Anasazi was too rough.
yeah, but that decorative wise, I think over embellished. But I mean, I think the general shape was on those lines. Karnak Temple, I think, was
yeah,
mentioned, or Petra.
Karnak Temple and Petra were the two ones that were sounding more like what it was doing. It was like a lot of things kind of built straight up, and then whatever embellishments. Seems like a lot of right angles going on with it, and a lot of things mostly oriented upright. Now I don't know if everything's built out of like solid blocks or everything is done kind of with stone that fits together, and that's how it gets its structure. So I'd have to look into that a little bit more, but it also depends on what kind of techniques. Maybe they've got a way to kind of make their own sandstone cement or whatever, and that's what they're using. They've just got giant molds that they pour things into, or they make giant molds of something consistent in just like large rectangular bricks, and then have people carve it down into the actual thing, paint it over, or bake clay over the top of it potentially, even to give it more
Yeah.
of a natural
Well,
reddish
being that
color or
there's not
whatever.
a huge source of water, I imagine that you're more likely dry fitting things and certainly shaping existing stone more than creating mortars and
Well,
other.
Congarai does have water, so it seems like they could mess with cement and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I just it's one of those things where it just I guess it just depends on how much of a resource you want to use. You work with what you've got, and if they're, I guess it's just depend on
Yeah,
what is easily quarryable for them versus what do they have to actually have built,
yeah,
or construct. So hurry up with them guidebooks so we can find out.
yeah. Seriously, we want knowledge.
I wonder too what it would be like to have rain that evaporates mysteriously in the desert areas. Like it used to be grasslands. Um, doesn't necessarily mean that rain never falls, but maybe it just doesn't stay. I don't know. I don't
The
know. I
clouds
don't know
the
about that.
clouds died, and it only rains in the other planes and realms.
They just
it
evaporate before as they come into the area. I don't know.
yeah.
Actually, on that note, it'd be interesting if they actually suffer flash flooding or things like that, because what happens with desertous areas that
Oh
when they
yeah.
do get a sudden rainfall, there's no ground. The ground, yes, it's there, and you think desert, of course, it'll absorb the water, but usually you need healthy root systems to absorb water and filter it first. So it's entirely possible that it just it hits a saturation point, and then do they deal with flooding? And if they do, how do they how have they used that to their advantage? Because at that point, well, if you know it can happen every now and then, channel that to something.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, and that could be one of those lost Ghoravi things, that they have their own almanac of like when it's actually going to happen, when those floods are going to occur.
that'd be
Um,
cool.
and it'd be
Find
something
that
that you
artifact.
could actually discover and actually predict, and make something of it, have it be some really big deal. Or if it's long lost knowledge and you're the only one who knows about it, express yourself as some sort of prophet. And once you've done it once, and then you know when it's going to happen again, oh man, you're going to be reigning in whatever they praise you with. Like
As long as
that,
it's
or
as long as you're right.
yeah, or you're one of those prophets that they love so much they sacrifice. Which, I still think about like even sacrificing that poor whale. Like, is that whale going to come through Animaya's realm back out in the ocean somewhere at some point? Like, that's the thing I think
All
about
different creatures.
sacrifice, how it actually could be an honor in Theleston, because you're going to come back, but in the process of being sacrificed, you may also get some really killer blessing that like
Or
slows your
maybe
temporal damage rate or something. You
maybe
actually
that's what
live
makes
longer for it.
sacrifices so powerful is that you don't get the option to come back. Something in the ritual actually sacrifices all your future chances,
If it's something
and
like that,
that's the
you're
real
probably
value of a
being
sacrifice.
sacrificed to a god that isn't anime. You're being, or sacrificed in such a way that like your flesh and everything else involved is just like being given to some god. It's like, yep, there he goes. And at that point, then you actually wonder, can players do that to another player willingly, or is there something that you'd have to do to? Is there something that prevent it, or is there always this scenario where you'll get rescued at the last moment, or something like that? Dude who's gonna get eaten by the Hydra people,
All right, yeah.
because he doesn't really explain what happens. He's just like, yeah, well, things happen. Here I am. You wonder, like, did he just die and respawn?
Just doesn't quite understand that function, yeah. Hey, I've seen some things, man. That's some stuff.
Yeah,
Wouldn't
exactly.
recommend it.
Exactly. What's up,
So
Diggs?
we also had mentioned the axe, the war axe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was the thing that I thought was great. So, their axe is specifically a fighting axe. It's not for practical use. It's like a war pick with, I guess, a blunt side on the other end, so you can, smash through armor and stuff if you need to. And it's got a really long handle for a two-hander, and it's, or I guess maybe it's not a two-hander. It's a long, but can potentially be used with one hand, as Verde was saying. If you're almost using it like a lance, you're kind of bracing it under your arm and just trying to hack through or whatever when you swing, or smash through or whatever. But they didn't really have axes. They don't really have a lot of trees. They don't really have a lot of wood. So
Anymore.
yeah, so it'd almost be the sort of thing where you'd have to import the wood if you're going to make a good axe to begin with. But it's or I would imagine it'd be really, really heavy, but some like real beefy dude might actually be able to handle one with a metal shaft. Um, but you would only see them really used on horseback, because that's what they're there for. You're not going to see infantry using an axe, and you're not going to find a lumberjack using an axe. So, and the fact that there weren't really axes before kind of indicates to me that they actually used more saw-like tools to work with trees and lumber and wood in the past. So, there might still be some of that, and you might actually find remnants and artifacts of that in areas where there used to be trees but aren't now. And, there's been playa and other crap covering it for decades or however long. Time
That would
passes
make a lot of
quickly.
sense. I mean, since a lot of weapons, kind of get based on a utility function first. It's possible, especially if they were nomadic, that you'd have one that makes sense to develop, or have one that developed to service both, so that you have a means of working with whatever area you're in, but also having a ready weapon without having to carry both.
Yeah.
Adding weight.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're, I think, ready to wrap up. We're at the hour mark. I'm not sure that we mentioned at the top of the hour that the reason why we got all this good lore to talk about is because they made a bit of a change to their fireside chats. They want to recapture some of the lore and interesting things about the world itself that used to come in with the weekly dev blogs. They want to bring that into the fireside chat instead of only focusing on the development aspects of it, and let us know what stage they are in development with the various parts. And I think that's great because we love the lore, and it's very interesting lore. And hopefully, again, we have so much, and there's so many different skills and so many different cultures, that we will have interesting conflicts that isn't just, I want to kill everything, but actual reasons behind the conflicts.
Yeah. Something we've always wanted to see in online multiplayer games, but they just never seem to do.
Hmm.
Yeah, take the simple route instead of the rewarding, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that was always weird to me that, like, just using WoW as an example, Horde and Alliance call everything the exact same name. Everybody's agreed on the names of everything. That's just like, no. No, not even close. I
Hmm.
mean, you can't even speak the same damn language. How am I, like, calling it the same things as them?
Hmm.
Because you got to make it simple for the players, man. Players don't want complexity.
Yeah, but when
Hmm.
they're talking to me, I'm hearing Wrath, Lord, Nithnos, blah, blah, blah. It's like,
Hmm.
how can we...
I know.
And then you can understand their NPCs, though. Those you can understand, because for some reason they speak the super common, everybody can understand it language. Anyway, enough on that subject. Yeah, it's about a wrap up time here. So, Zero, do you have anything else you wanted to say?
Not anything new per se, but as always, check out more on Theleston.com. Also, check out their Patreon. Skyward Star has a patron site. It does pay to patron. I have a sample of what could potentially be some gator salts here, but from the story that I received with them, it sounds like that may not be the case. Said that information is actually on the Theleston site, locked behind founders' walls and gates. So, for those of you who have access, go check it out if you have not already. And if you would like, go to the patron site and get access. It's cool stuff. I'm not a sellout. Yes, I am, but it's done well for me so far in life.
Cool deal.
We should also think about guests, by the way. I'm just throwing that out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, definitely.
So,
Good point, because we could have used a fourth person on the show today, but we didn't quite reach out and say, "Hey, everybody, who wants to be on?" So we'll definitely have to do that next time. So
yeah.
on that
At
note,
least be thinking about it for future shows.
yeah, we will be back in 2 weeks as usual, and what the subject is, maybe based on what we see in the fireside, might be one of the things we have on our giant list of topics we already want to talk about. So you'll have to tune in then, or kind of follow along to figure out. Till then, thank y'all. See you later.